So yeah, the first question we've got today is, what was the content procurement process like for students before the BibliU WSU partnership was agreed?
You want to start?
Okay, so we have the typical processes that most institutions have. We have a bookstore on campus. They are assigned textbooks through their through the coursework. They go to the bookstore and they purchase a physical book. Some courses had online text, not terribly a lot of them. We did have a few that were using a process where we had found that we were struggling with it. Did they have the textbook on the very first day? So we had looked at some things for what we call Access Now. Convoluted would be my best word to describe that. So
got it.
Yeah.
Convoluted, a lot of miscommunication. Yeah. Just a lot of issues, and I might even add that we really worked hard several years ago to integrate open resources into many of our classes to try to reduce the cost to students, and
yeah,
we made a major stab at that and worked really hard towards it, and just really couldn't achieve what we wanted. So we kind of backslid back out of that before we met you all at BibliU.
Super interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd realized you had that OER initiative a few years back. And I know there's still some OER there at WSU Tech. You know, what's kind of your future perspective on OER?
So our faculty like the idea of OER. And most faculty do. They want to give students access to content that it has no cost. The problem with OER is it's not always there when you need it or want it. And you don't own it. So the owner decides, well, I want to take it down for revision, and you've decided you're going to use it. Well, guess what? You don't get that word until, well, when the student tries to access it and it's not there. So that kind of turns faculty off, particularly where Sheree will tell you that I'm very process driven. And that means my faculty have to have that stuff done and ready, and it's in your course and you've tested it all a good 2 weeks before your class starts. When they come to me and say, oh, I don't have a textbook, I say, where have we been all this time? I'm not very sympathetic, frankly, at that point. So that, because then we have to go through the process of getting either a physical textbook or working with a publisher to get it inside your course. It just isn't convenient, and it can't be, I hate to say this word, but it can't be trusted all the time because it's just not there when you need it. So.
Yeah, makes sense. I think the quality, and as you say, the relevant OER does vary massively. Some course areas there's quite a lot of good stuff, and then other course areas not so much. That makes sense. I guess back to the point on like content before we struck up our partnership, Sheree, from the perspective of like the different stakeholders you deal with, from the students and the faculty, perhaps the board, what was kind of everybody's feel? Because I've got a good feel for what your experience was. What do you think was the perspective of those stakeholders?
So I guess I would say, you know, as an institution, not unlike all other institutions across the nation, you know, we're so focused on access, equity, and affordability. And so, you know, we've been continuing to explore what does that look like, because if you can find something that assists in any one of those three areas, you know, you want to embrace it. And certainly students, they want that, and certainly faculty wants that, and as administrators, we certainly want that, because, you know, it's a strategic focus for us, and it's the strategic focus across the nation, particularly for two-year colleges and for four in many cases, access, affordability, and equity. So you're always looking for ways to drive that, you know, those values into the work that you do, and students become hopefully the beneficiary.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that makes sense. As you say, it's certainly from my perspective seems to be quite a universal challenge for the community colleges as well as the universities as well. Cool. Are there any, because previously you had the independent store. What was sort of the broad challenges with that independent store experience? You talked about, convoluted, complicated in terms of choice, and also some miscommunication. Were there any other challenges that come to mind?
We're in a time of great disruption, and disruption in higher ed is, has been exacerbated by COVID. And so this was happening before COVID, but now it's exacerbated because of that. And the traditional model of a bookstore, whether it's, a college run bookstore, it's an independent bookstore, there's just, there's probably a better model as we move forward with innovation and creativity and understanding both student needs and faculty needs with regards to, what that traditional bookstore looks like as we move forward. So, we outsourced our bookstore about 5 or 6 years ago. And that just needs to be, that's just a continual piece that has to find continued process improvement, continued improvement to service. And again, with an eye on access and affordability.
Yeah, makes sense. So you outsourced it 5 or 6 years ago. Was it independent again after that for a period of time?
Yes. I mean, we outsourced it to the university and they've been running our
Got
books.
it. Yeah, they were running it. Yep.
And bookstores are going to, the tradition, it's like everything else. What we might have perceived or what we might have experienced in the last several years in a traditional university or college bookstore, that experience is going to become very different as we move forward, just because of the disruption in higher education, which is
absolutely,
which is needed.
Exactly. I think
technology enhancements are going to drive that as well.
Absolutely right. I think broadly in higher ed, this idea of the bookstore being disrupted or changing, as you say, is just one example of many of these changes that are happening in higher ed right now. And the coronavirus, I think, has sort of pushed a number of the changes somewhat into the future. Things that were happening a bit more slowly prior are now happening a bit more quickly. And I gather when we spoke, one of the challenges that the outsourcing had was that it was difficult. Viability for the store was difficult, particularly on your campus. Was that right? And there was a challenge there in terms of supplying and just the economic viability of the operation.
That would be true. Yeah. That's where they're looking. I mean, everybody has a ROI on the work they do, and the return on investment of bookstores is certainly, I think, being analyzed across the nation at all of our colleges and universities, and there's a lot of competition on the open market that we've never experienced before. Certainly another advancement and disruption that will affect how this moves forward. I think that's what was so intriguing to me, frankly, about BibliU when I met you at Hertie. It was just a very intriguing product and an intriguing way to create access, affordability, and equity for students, in a very different model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what was it specifically about the sort of universal content solution and digital universal content solution that we talked about in that Hertie, and we have a partnership now to deliver for you in the fall a pilot for? What was it about that solution that was, as you say, sort of captivating and interesting?
Because it answered some of the questions that or it overcame some of the questions and problems that we had before. Number one, it was affordable. Number two, it had consistency. Number three, it had training available. Number four, it integrated well with our LMS system. So there was just a lot of things about it that, as I listened to you at Hertie explain your product, and that's what I love about that venue, is that you get to hear about new things. And, it was really great to be able to listen to not only the success, but the vision that you have and the product success that you've got based, I feel like, on common values of what higher education is looking at, and that's access, equity, and affordability. And you provide those things in order for us to do that. So it's a win for students. It's also a win for faculty because it overcomes some of the objections that we had before as far as connectivity to the LMS and as far as reliability of content.
Yep. That makes perfect sense. And I'd echo what you said there, Sheree, that Hertie is an excellent venue, medium for having these sort of discussions, both from my perspective, because I get a lot of feedback. BibliU gets a lot of feedback from residents and administrators like yourselves on how we can be better and how we can align better with affordability and equity and the key initiatives you outlined. But also, I think in reverse, for forward-thinking presidents like yourself to have a look at what's out there. So I totally recommend anyone that's listening to this to check out Hertie, and Tony Cleveland there is awesome to deal with. So I totally recommend people reaching out and having a look at what they do. And in terms of looking to the future, and we touched on a few of these things at Hertie, what else do you think could be incorporated into this kind of universal content solution to make it even better than what we're hoping to pilot, this fall?
So we're doing e-texts this fall. We
Yep.
are already looking at the next step, which is for the spring semester moving into
Yep.
courseware. This is the courseware piece is going to be integral to our full adoption, because we have so many faculty that that's what they do. They've adopted all of those pieces. The other piece for us is we have some very, very specific course content that you might not find at other universities. Because we are a technical college, making sure that those pieces are available. And some of them are kind of unique, like the US government, the FAA manual. For one of our biggest programs, it's not a textbook, it's literally a government document. That
Yep.
Right now, students are lugging around this massive thing. And they need to get it in an iPad, frankly, and make it as seamless as possible for them.
That's a great
Yep.
example, as a lot of the things that we do, here at the National Center for Aviation Training, we have FAA approved programs. And if there's a way to, package those FAA pieces where they can be easily accessed through this, that would be a real great thing for all of us across the nation that are engaged in FAA programs in both pilot and airframe and power plant mechanics.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, the FAA manual is definitely something that we'll want to present to your students through the platform. And my understanding is that it's freely available from the government online.
Yeah.
Students generally have their printed copy, as you say, but ideally, it's in the platform with all of the functionality and it's there on the iPad, good to go. So I would consider that a form of OER, really, but a really obviously quality form of OER that the government has put together themselves. So super interesting. And Trish, on that point of content, I mean, you've obviously dealt with huge number of different types of adoptions and all the kind of faculty, the faculty choosing and using different things. What do you think the future of content looks like? Do you think there'll be increasing sort of functionality and software involved? Do you think textbooks are kind of here to stay? Do you think there'll be more OER? I'm just kind of curious on what you think the future of content looks like. More courseware, for instance? I
personally think it's going to what you guys folks call courseware. Students haven't changed. We assign all those textbooks, say read chapters 6 through 5. They read chapter 6. So you have to find other ways to do this. And the smart faculty are already doing it. We have a faculty member in our welding department who has already figured out how to do simulation in welding. You wouldn't think that was something that you do, but he does it with a machine, and it saves a lot of time, energy, and money for everybody. That is where the future for this. It's going to be in the courseware. Can you make it interactive? Can you make it engaging? And if it's not engaging, the students are not going to access it. And eventually the faculty figure that one out too. if you assign chapter 6 through 9 and they only read chapter 6, how do you get that information from chapter 7 through 9? Lectures are not the thing. There has to be some other way to do it. It's coursework.
I would definitely agree with that. And I would say the more interactive and engaging that can be, because you think about how the modalities of teaching are going to change as we move forward in more high flex classrooms, hybrid options, online, even face-to-face still has to be much more engaging than what it's been, because look at who our students are going to become. You know, they're being engaged in that every day. I'll use a great example of this. I was visiting a high school recently, a group of high schools here locally that are all engaged in esports, and the learning that can happen in esports. You meet students where they are because they want to play video games. Well, then they learn teamwork and collaboration and problem solving and those kind of things that happen in that ecosystem. So one of the things we're thinking about doing is creating an esports class that could be a computer elective instead of traditional computer application. But you think about that, you're meeting students where they're at. So as we look to the future and we look to different types of delivery modalities and the continuation of the evolution of that disruption, certainly content is going to have to follow that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great example, but where you look at students who in their everyday life are dealing with, video games, some of which are virtual reality now, Google and YouTube for just general content consumption, and then coming to get a 1,000-page textbook. It's certainly, I think, out of sync with the way that they're learning and growing up. So I think you're exactly right. And the content needs to kind of match, what the students are doing and engaging with. Totally agree there. We're actually, I think one of the challenges with courseware and why the uptake has probably been a little slow is that a lot of good content doesn't have a courseware option. As you know, there's a great textbook, from Pearson in finance, and it just may not have a courseware option for it. So one thing we're working on is an Engage product that essentially will turn any textbook into courseware. So it's got personalized adaptive learning assessment questions in it. It's got a communication forum in it. And of course, it's got the assessment analytics that can feed into the learning management system. So we're trying to work on a way to help the sector move more things to courseware, because right now, you essentially got some publisher courseware for some courses, which is awesome. Obviously, you've got some non-publisher courseware, which often requires the course to be completely rebuilt and changed, and a lot of work for the institution, but nothing to really create courseware from the good content we have already. So definitely something we'd like to talk to you both about in the future, perhaps once the pilot's live and underway. Just on that point of engagement, student engagement, at WSU Tech, do you have a learning analytics dashboard? What do you do to try and ensure, that you maximize student persistence?
Wow, student persistence is tough. That is tough. We call it grit here. So we actually have a course that is required across our entire curriculum, which pieces of it, that's what we're teaching, is can you be persistent? And you have to understand that you have to be persistent in order to succeed in life. We use the micro foundation to supplement the curriculum in that. We have in our student learning outcomes, every program must measure what we call workplace skills. This is everything from your attendance, but it also includes things like persistence or grit. How are you doing? Yes, you came in and it didn't go well. Were you able to turn it around? Those are the things that we do to try to measure that. We actually have implemented a new piece of software to make the actual aggregation of that information easier. We're still in the implementation stage. It's called EAC. It's part of the Blackboard platform. If you ask me in about 9 months, I should have some better numbers for you for that. Be able to tell you that this is what it looks like institution-wide.
Super awesome. Yeah, as you say, it's such a complicated issue with many facets. I wasn't aware of the grit course, as you say, that's required across the curriculum. I think that's really cool. And I think, yeah, as you say, I think software can help kind of track these indicators and help both the student understand, you know, where they're at, but also the institution understand which students to help the most with building that grit, as you say. I really like that word too, by the way. And yeah, that's definitely something that we'd like to work with you on going forward, is feeding all of the data that we collect, whether it be, you know, reading time, whether it be searching, feeding that data into that system such that the system can take advantage of the data we have as well. Because that's the other thing in institutions, so many good data pools, but often the you know, separate and siloed. So kind of centralizing those into your existing Blackboard platform is definitely the way to go. So, well, I really appreciate both of you taking the time today. That kind of brings me to the end of the questions. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on, or any leaving thoughts?
Well, Dave, actually, John Holcroft is on the call, and he dropped something in the chat. And he said, curious if WSU Tech measures the value of a student going through and taking all classes and graduating versus a student who does not do this, and how BibliU might help you measure this.
So obviously, like every institution, we have retention numbers, which we track religiously at programmatic, at course level. The amount of data that we're going to get through the BibliU piece will help us look to see are the resources that we're providing, are they actually using them? That's going to be one of the keys that we're looking at. How much time are they spending in there? Because if a faculty member is truly assigning something that the students aren't actually accessing, but the students are passing a class, then that's a good way for us to decide where's the gap here. Okay, what's happening in the classroom? What's happening on the assessment side? I'll be interested to see what those data points look like. Won't know how it will impact our students until we see the first round.
I want to add to that, just as we're kind of closing out, how important the work that you're doing is to our success and our students' success, because you are helping us be subject matter experts in content creation. And certainly faculty, you know, I mean, faculty have so many demands on their time, that the more that we can engage with you and the more that we can provide, you know, relevant and engaging and authentic and I hate to use the word entertaining, but somewhat entertaining content through what the resources that you have. As we kind of start our pilot and roll this out to a pretty hefty goal of 90% in the next couple of years of course content with you. I mean, what you're doing is providing a very, very, very essential element to the success that our students will have. And then, you know, we track, once they leave here, we track their placement, and we track where what their wages earned are and that kind of thing. And so, you know, those are important metrics of post-graduation for all of us across the nation that are engaged in this work, to know how well our students are doing once they leave.